The Last of Us is easily one of my favorite games, which isn't much of an original statement here on YouTube, but it rings true for me nonetheless. I, like many others, got invested in Joel and Ellie's relationship during their journey, and I have also been one of many fans eagerly awaiting the sequel. I'm still looking forward to the game despite the whole shitstorm that's been golfed up over at Naughty Dog, but that's not what we're here for. Instead, what I want to discuss in this video is the thing that kept me coming back to this game, the thing I've poured countless hours into over the past few years and had my parents thinking that I was addicted to my PlayStation. You guys saw it in the title, I'm talking about the Factions multiplayer. With all the buzz about Tiger Woods being in the story mode, I figured I would be someone who talked about something else in regard to the game. Ultimately, those multiplayer leaks didn't get my hopes up about the game actually having multiplayer versus what the devs have straight up said in other interviews and articles. But I figured why not make this video if there even is a slight chance that the game will have it. So here's the wishful thinking, am I right? I basically want to use this video to talk about the multiplayer in the first game and what features or changes I would want to see in a sequel. Plus I have loads of footage saved from a bunch of different games and kind of felt like showing it off. If I could give a brief explanation of what the multiplayer was like for someone who played the game only for the story, I'd say it's pretty much the single player but against the real people. Before you tear into me talking about how obvious that is, let me explain. The gameplay in the story mode pits you against human enemies who try different approaches and will use their numbers and surroundings to their advantage. If two of them are shooting at you from your left side, one of their friends will try and bum rush you from the right. And that's just one example of how these enemies move and think. They'll even shout out to their allies to flank you in the middle of the game. Human enemies also have different weapons like handguns, baseball bats, 2x4s, pipes, machetes, shotguns, sniper rifles, and molotovs to use against you. The enemies basically behave enough like real humans to be able to put up a decent enough challenge for the player, especially in the game's higher difficulties. The Last of Us multiplayer works like these encounters in a way, except you have to face players who will easily come up with way more unique strategies and methods to take you down than AI could. Mix this in with the brutality of the gameplay and you almost always get absolute carnage. That's why the multiplayer, like the single player, can actually be quite unforgiving and punishing a lot of the time if you're not familiar with how it plays. Just like in the multiplayer, you basically find any way to take down your opponent with the skills and resources at your disposal. You can punch people out, shank the shit out of them, blow their heads off with your gun, blow them up with a bomb, light their asses on fire, or just end it all with a simple snap. Once a player's health goes all the way down, they go down on all fours and have to be revived by one of their teammates. The red circle that hangs over you lets you know how long you have left before you die if someone doesn't revive you. Being in the down position also leaves players open for another player to perform one of the game's many brutal but incredibly satisfying special executions. The devs went above and beyond with this part of the game. These kills are always satisfying to pull off after steamrolling through an entire team, especially considering how hard these games can be. The downside to pulling these off is that they do temporarily leave you open for an opponent to get the drop on you. You do have the option to just shoot or kick down players if you don't want to put yourself in that position. Players start off each game picking one of the loadouts that is either set for them or one of their own making. These loadouts equip you with a sidearm and a large firearm to start off, and each loadout has a different set of survival skills that give players certain advantages and abilities to help them out in the game. Most loadouts also have a purchasable weapon that can give you the advantage in combat. You purchase this weapon, bullets, and weapon upgrades with parts, the game's in-game currency, that you receive from playing in the multiplayer games. My personal favorite set loadout in the game is Suppression. I just enjoy using the launcher way too much. Factions multiplayer puts players in 4v4 matches in 3 different game modes: Supply Raid, Survivors, and Interrogation. Supply Raid is basically a 15-minute team deathmatch where both teams collectively share a number of 20 respawns for the game. Every time you or one of your teammates dies, one of those respawns is used. Kill off the entire enemy team before you run out of respawns, or finish the 15-minute time with more respawns and or teammates than your enemy team and you win. I should also say that if anyone joins the team in the middle of one of these games, then they'll use one of your spawns when coming into the game. So the game will sometimes put you at a slight disadvantage in this regard. This one is my personal favorite mode of the 3 since it leaves the most room to just cut loose, since the whole objective is to constantly kill the enemy team until they don't come back. Survivors is a mode that pits the teams of 4 against each other in 3-minute 30-second rounds with no respawns. Kill off the entire enemy team in a round or finish the round with more players and you win. First team to win 4 rounds wins the game. You also start every round with only the weapons you have on you, as crafted items don't carry over into other rounds. Admittedly, I didn't play this mode that much for most of the time that I've had this game. For some reason, I had it in my head that it wouldn't be as fun as the other two, especially supply rate. I decided to give it another shot for this video, and I have to say I was sleeping on this mode heavy. It forces players to approach combat differently as every move becomes way more crucial to your team's victory or loss in each round. It's also easier to make a comeback in this mode than it is the other modes because of how it's set up. I think that's all part of what makes Survivors all the more fun though. Interrogation is a mode where both teams have to get a collective 5 interrogations in the form of a special execution or a shiv execution in order to locate their lockbox. Once the team gets 5 interrogations, the enemy team will the enemy team's lockbox will spawn somewhere in one of the far corners of the map. First team to open the enemy team's lockbox wins. The lockboxes have these little circles on them to indicate how close it is to being open, and it's marked by these little lines. You can also win games if you get the enemy team's lockbox past the first 2 lines, but they fail to do the same with yours. This mode is a really nice change of pace from winning purely by killing, but it can easily be the most frustrating game to play at times. Whereas the only objective of the other 2 modes is to kill your opponents, interrogation games can often be halted because of how often players will kill each other on accident before getting an interrogation. Interrogation kills also take a little bit longer to pull off than normal executions, so you'd always have to be certain that no other enemy is around when doing these. The biggest problem that I've had with this mode specifically is that the game's respawn times just become a huge pain in the ass. There have been way too many instances in interrogation where the enemy team would kill off me and or most of my team, and then the respawn times would be damn near a whole 20 seconds, which in most instances will give the enemy team enough time to open your lockbox. Sometimes the game will do this and spawn you all the way on the other side of the fucking map. I think this happens due to spawns being influenced by the enemy team's location, but I'm not entirely certain. These issues don't take away from the overall fun of interrogation though, but it can be absolutely unfair and sometimes not even for the right reasons. I think the high risk, high reward aspect of the gameplay is at its strongest in this mode. The factions part of the multiplayer basically comes in the form of the player choosing to play as a hunter or as a firefly when they start the multiplayer up. This shows up in the gameplay with your character models sporting raggedy blue colors as the hunters or the military yellows as the fireflies. You also get cosmetic options like putting different hats and masks on your character, and also by creating a personal clan emblem. The multiplayer games run on a cycle of 12 weeks, with one match representing a day of the week in these 12-week cycles. You're also tasked with taking care of a personal clan through these 12 weeks by doing well and collecting supplies in the multiplayer games. The more successful you are in your games, the better off your clan will be, and your population grows with each game. If you fail to get a sufficient number of supplies for your clan after a bad game, then they'll start to suffer since you didn't get the supplies necessary to take care of them. After completing a certain number of matches, the game will then generate small tasks or challenges for the player to complete. You pick which challenge to do here, so you can pick a challenge that you feel comfortable completing. These come along with the events that the game generates for your clan to survive during their 12 weeks. Make sure you really watch out for the events though. Some of them can actually kill off your entire clan if you fail to reach the minimum level of your challenge. Funny enough, at one point I actually began to use some of these scenarios to kill off members of my population on purpose. It got annoying having to constantly take care of so many of them at once. So I would pick things like get 3 downs with a revolver, and then get those downs as fast as I could in the span of 3 games, only to switch over to a new loadout and not bother with the challenge anymore. There are probably other ways that you can finesse the 12 weeks, but I personally wouldn't know too much about that. I also think the maps in here are really well designed in regard to the gameplay. They're rearranged areas of the main story rearranged to accommodate the multiplayer. They're typically large areas filled with all sorts of random obstacles to help provide cover and to maneuver around. Regardless of where you end up taking cover, there will always be a weak spot that an enemy can exploit. My personal favorite map is probably Bookstore since it's so much more close quartered than the other map. I still want the same type of thing going for a sequel, and hopefully nothing short of variety considering this game gave us 15 maps by the end of its run. Despite everything that's going for the multiplayer, there were some problems I had with it, especially some things that got annoying the longer I played the game. For starters, the connection issues. I want to throw my controller every time that stupid plugin symbol comes up. Whenever your internet gets faulty during these moments, your character will automatically stand in place and you'll have no control of them while the internet puts itself back together. This leaves you open for enemies to come up and just kill you while you're stuck like that long enough. There have been way too many instances where this would get me killed or it'd help me get a kill. These moments become 10 times worse and become a deciding factor in how a match ends. Other times the connection issue will just straight up kick you out of the match. What the fuck? These don't happen frequently enough to become a major hindrance on the experience, but they're still a problem nonetheless. This game also feels like it cheats me out of a kill sometimes, even when I've for sure gotten the drop on an enemy. Granted, some of these moments could have just been me fucking up and missing shots, but others not so much. I also think more customizable options would have been nice too, like changing the looks of your guns, or picking what your multiplayer character clothes are besides what's on their head. It'd be nice to leave more room for players to decide how their character looks, and it could have added a nice flair to the multiplayer. The initial reason I wanted to make this video was to talk about the sorely missed opportunity to have more game modes with Infected. The main story and the multiplayer both dropped the ball by waiting till the Left Behind DLC to actually have encounters with both non-infected and infected enemies. Just imagine how insane a game of Supply Raid would be if you had to fight off a horde of clickers, runners, or maybe even a bloater, while fighting off the enemy team. Simply adding infected in these modes would have added so much to the gameplay. Like if there's a clicker somewhere nearby one of your enemies, you could throw a smoke bomb at your enemy to stun them and get the clicker to attack them. Or you could open an enemy team's lockbox while they're fighting off your team and infected. Your team would also be fighting off the infected too, but it's part of the craziness. They could even have some cordyceps growing in certain maps and have players wear gas masks that can be broken if damaged in gameplay. Ideally, I'd want the option to have a regular 4v4 mode and then one with infected thrown in the mix. I also wouldn't be opposed to something like an 8-man horde mode. There's a lot of different places that they could take this, and I'm still trying to be hopeful that the devs are just lying to us in order for us to be pleasantly surprised by the amazing new upgraded sequel multiplayer in The Last of Us 2. So here's to wishful thinking. That's about all I want to talk about for this vid. I just wanted to get these thoughts out there with the slight hope that The Last of Us 2 has a multiplayer mode. I think I might also make a story wishful thinking video too, where I do something like this, but instead present my own list of ideas for stories in the world of The Last of Us. So be on the lookout for that to whoever's watching. Playing through the story mode again made me realize just how much they could build off in this world if they wanted to. And if you did watch this vid all the way through, I just want to say thank you. Please like this video and feel free to comment down below if you want to discuss this more. With that being said, I'm out now. Be easy out there.
There'll come a day where kids can just be kids again.